as well, and we do plan on having some more standard style of episodes. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Here. Okay. So you have to bear with me. This is the first time I've done this, so hopefully we don't have too many problems. And it's something that Matt and I both kind of talked about. We do want to have some standard back and forth episodes where we're kind of talking about broader subjects, but we also wanted to kind of go over the armies that we play. And I shouldn't say play, I should say own. Luckily, we're in a community that's pretty generous, so I think we all are able to kind of play basically whatever anybody has. But I own 6 factions, so I'm going to try and do one of these for each one of the factions. One of those factions is Night Hunt. I haven't decided how I want to approach that. I have a lot of opinions on Night Hunt in general. I don't think that they are fundamentally as an army broken. I think that 3 units are really good right now that really prop it up. And the season rules are 1/3 of the season rules just don't work on them. So I think that's to put them in a good position. And one of those units might actually be a little hampered right now, but that's beside the point. Today I want to talk about FEC, and a big reason I wanted to jump on that is I've had some challenges while I've been playing them. I've noticed that stats coming back have shown that there's a lot of challenges. And I have a few ideas, and I think that a lot of us have been basically playing FEC wrong for how they should be operating, or how they have to operate. I'll say it like that. I think we're going to go through briefly through the battle traits. It's been long enough that most people should know them, but we'll brush up on it, and then I'll talk about the formations. And I think that's going to be a good pivot point. And when we get done talking about those, I do want to rank the units, but I'm going to rank them related to the formation that I think that we should probably be in. So without further ado, we'll get started. One other thing I did want to talk about, though, is I'm going to be making a lot of conversations related to the meta. And if you are watching this internationally, or you've seen this, after the fact, I'm relating it to kind of what we refer to as the Midwest Beef Boys meta. It's a thing. If you know anything about the United States and the Midwest, they love their meat and potatoes. They love thick beefy stuff. And also ahead of time, I do apologize if my son is making a little noise during the stream, but we got to work with what we got, right? So in the Midwest, a lot of events that we go to, a lot of events that we run across, and even in casual games and one-dayers, that the beefy stuff is really popular. Trogs, ogres, slaves to darkness, even stormcast, and I think that is well represented in the United States. Although in the Midwest it is super common. Like, you were going to be fighting those beefy guys, Nurgle as well. And so I think that meta, which seems like it's pretty okay right now, does have Iron Jaws, is another one, does create problems for FEC, and I think that they need to. Your FEC list is going to change a lot depending on the meta. When we've got thinner, more screen-based units and more mobile units and stuff, I think that the FEC list will be a lot different. I think they can feast pretty well, but we're going to have to change a lot based off of these bigger units, because fundamentally the way that we're generating our noble deeds has to definitely change. So we're just going to go into the faction rules. The noble deeds points, a few things. It's relatively unchanged from 3rd, and I think we're all pretty familiar with it, but there's a few caveats that I kind of wanted to talk about. So your heroes can gain between 0 and 6 of these noble deed points, and then you can utilize these noble deed points for different things depending on the type of heroes. So you earn these noble deed points by either successfully casting a spell. So the spell has to go off. It can't be unbound. And then you get 1 point for that. You also get it when your prayer has been answered. So this is not when chanted. You need to successfully answer the prayer. So we're looking at lower prayer values to be a little bit better, and trying to strategically time when you want to answer these prayers. Sometimes you might want to hold off for the stronger effect, but sometimes you actually need that noble deed point, so you might just let the prayer fly. It's also worth noting that you have to have a target to chant a prayer, so usually you're using those friendly prayers on the early turn as opposed to the hostile ones. And then the other one, which is pretty interesting, is in the way that you would primarily think is your heroes can get noble deeds for the amount of damage points that are inflicted by an ability. So I actually want to stop on that keyword inflicted. Inflicted actually happens before wards. So your opponent can ward this damage, and then you'll still get the noble deed points. It's worth noting that. So in the attack sequence, inflicted damage goes straight to the damage pool, and stuff in the damage pool is then warded. So worth pointing that out. And then the other thing is it doesn't actually call out damage that's been inflicted on enemy units. It just says damage inflicted by fight abilities, which does mean you can also get these points off of endless spells and manifestations, which I think is pretty cool. They're running around a lot right now. So sometimes your opponent might like that. That's a good way to generate noble deeds off of some of your squishier heroes, is by attacking these static manifestations or attacking some of these manifestations that you don't think can kill your guys. So Feeding Frenzy, that's our general buff. So these two abilities kind of work. We have recursion-based abilities where you're spending the points, and then we have, while you have 6 points on a hero, that hero is going to have a 12-inch bubble that's going to add 1 to attack's characteristics. This uniquely also affects companion weapons, which is pretty awesome. But these abilities are a bit of a non-bow, as you have to juggle using the recursion abilities and expending your points, and then having somebody on full points to give yourself the extra attacks. Because what you'll see is a lot of our guys don't have super quality attacks, and you really need that weight of dice. So at 6, yeah, you're gonna get a 12-inch bubble, and then Muster Guard is the next ability. So this is for your courtier heroes, which are your smaller heroes. And the courtier heroes, every time you spend a noble deed point, which it has been errated to what it says here, so you can spend any number of noble deed points and then bring back 1 surf model per point or 1 knight model per 2 noble deeds. You can still only use this ability once, so you can only affect 1 unit per courtier hero. But being able to spend the points and bring back models should mean that you're in a good position for attrition. And then the other ability is Summon Loyal Subjects. And that one you pick, you would use an abhorrent hero. So these are your bigger heroes. These are all either priests or wizards. And you spend 6 noble deed points to completely bring back a destroyed unit. That unit is at half strength, rounded up, and they come in from the battlefield edge and more than 9 away from enemies. So this is pretty cool. It gives you basically recursion cost all of your units. And if you think about a way to generate noble deed points enough, and the fact that you can have multiple units using this is probably the best recursion in the game. If you think about some of the other factions, like maybe Skaven and some of the other ones that pay a command point, I think Zeech is another one, are somewhat on par, but you can technically do more with this because those others are commands. So I mean, at most they can bring back 5 units per game. Whereas, I mean, you could bring back every single unit you have at least once. It is a replacement unit, and core rules mean you can't replace a replacement unit, so you can bring back everything once. And then the last one is this Royal Blood, which is just all your opponents heal D3 during your phase. And that's fine. It's unfortunately, it's just never going to be enough. It's not something you can rely on. It's nice if you just get hit with chip damage. It's an activated ability, so I would do it after you cast all of your spells in case you miscast, and then you can just try and heal back up. It's nothing to write home about. One thing I do want to point out, all of these abilities are your movement phase or your hero phase. So this is like most death armies. This is a very active player phase army. That means that double turns really hurt. You really want to avoid them as much as possible. So we do want to keep those drops low so we can just dictate that. As a matter of fact, I rarely double turn with this army too, unless you really need to put the game away or you really need to bring back a lot of stuff, which you can do, which you can take 2 turns in a row and just bring back so many things that now you basically have like killed your opponent, but maybe it's more like you're back at your starting capacity. So next we're going to go into the battle formations, and this is probably going to be the longest part of like the non-tiers because I kind of want to talk about where I think we're going wrong. So we'll start with we'll skip Cannibal Court and we'll go to Lords of the Manor. Lords of the Manor is the most popular one being chosen right now. Lords of the Manor on paper looks amazing. When we look at all of these abilities, it's really awesome. Um, but there might be a quick caveat. So it gives you a passive, and it's each time a friendly unit uses an ability that returns any slain models to a friendly serfs or knights unit, you get to add 1 to the number of models returned to that unit. That's a fantastic ability, honestly. Just reading that, it is. And we have a few ways to bring units back outside of just using the courtiers, but it's basically like the courtiers, when they bring something back, you get a +1. We also have a spell that brings back models equal to damage points allocated, and remember, allocated is afterwards. Um, so that one's really powerful because that affects infantry models. So you can bring back 1 or 2 knights models off of that, and we'll talk about that spell later. And then just add 1. Like it's pretty big, and pretty solid ability. This also affects rally, and this also affects one of the other heroes that we'll get into. There's 2 major downsides to this, in my opinion, and it's that. Give me a second. I've been asked to zoom in a bit. Um, and go ahead, and yeah, if you guys have, if there's any problems, any visual problems or anything, just go ahead and pop a question in the chat, and I'll do my best. Okay, so the 2 main problems with this is that in order to bring back models, you are running courtiers most of the time, right? And these guys are softer. They usually have less wounds, and they don't have innate passive or non-fight ability generation of noble deeds points. So they have to fight. And then this is going to go back to that beef boy meta. And most, when we get to these guys, they can't fight. They just cannot survive. Anything that does 2 damage and rend 1 is going to be a serious threat to any of these courtier models. Even the hardiest one that I like using, the Vargulf, and the configuration that I run him in, he still only has 10 wounds, and he still is on a 5+ save. So any of these units, especially like Gluttons, I've been smacked hard by Gluttons. I've been smacked hard by Vanguard. It just doesn't take too many attacks to just drop these guys. And then because it's an active phase, your movement phase that you're bringing these models back, you often just like don't get a chance to bring anything back. So I think that's a big challenge for like how cool this looks on paper. Versus how good it actually is. And then the other problem is most of our units are just so squishy that if you they're often getting wiped before you get the chance to really bring models back and get a really big advantage. I'm finding that I'm either like down 1 or 2 models, so I'm getting just such a marginal effect, or the unit just got killed and it doesn't matter at all. I was rarely in a position where I was like really getting a ton of value out of this. That being said, this is way better with knights, so it's way better with bat spam because they're already on a 4 save and they're 4 wounds. So there are ways to make it work, but I do think right now with the meta, it is a bit of a trap. Ghoul Patrol I think is pretty solid because I think Crypt Ghouls are really solid. So that lets you just chain fight two Crypt Ghouls, and they're just weight of dice. There's just a lot of attacks, a ton of attacks, a ton of models. There's no range restriction, so you can have 2 units on completely different ends of the battlefield, and that flexibility is actually pretty awesome. So I think you could start a list with 4 units of ghouls, and then just kind of pepper it to wherever you want to go after that, and you could be in a pretty good spot. The problem is there are enough debuffs out right now, a lot of solid debuffs that you can be lowering attacks characteristics, you can be lowering hit profiles, and you can just put these ghouls into a position where they're, even though they have 20 attacks, like if you're hitting on 5s, like it kind of just doesn't matter. Or sorry, 20 models with 2 or 3 attacks, it just doesn't matter. You're just not getting enough through. And Royal Menagerie, this one needs a rewrite. It's just not good enough. Once per turn is like fine, but if you're going to do once per turn, I don't think it should be your combat phase, as you kind of already have a unit. I mean, you're already picking something to go first, and then it also shouldn't be on a 3+. Like, I don't know. That means half of the game, Royal Menagerie isn't doing anything, and the other half of the game, I mean, you can suggest that 2 turns it doesn't do anything, and so you're charging in with 2 monsters, kind of hoping that this happens, and then it doesn't, and maybe you lose one of those monsters, and it's just not good enough. But Cannibal Court, I think Cannibal Court is where we should be, based off of what I was saying about the meta and what I was saying about how hard it is to fight units right now. I think we need as much passive generation of Noble Deeds points as possible. And this one is once per turn at the end of any turn. So this is both turns, and that's awesome. You just trigger this ability, and then every hero wholly outside of friendly territory is going to gain 1 Noble Deed point. So this is going to push you into being more aggressive. And I think it's going to push you into wanting faster units. But I think over the course of a game, you're generating 10 Noble Deed points, maybe 9 if you can't get out on your first turn. And then obviously you could die, and that would change things, or the unit could die. But that passive generation is going to add up way more than your 1 or 2 combats that you maybe get in with your hero, that hopefully he just doesn't die before he gets to use any of his abilities. So I think, just a second, I think that just this passive generation of points is our best way to go. There's just not an economy of points with the current meta to not to think that you can send in heroes and that they're going to survive. They're going to be able to fight things. If screens come back, Lords of the Manor gets insanely good. It really does, and it probably beats out Hunger for Glory. If we're having a big heavy screen type thing, lots of tiny mobile units that still need to like get into the combat, Lords of the Manor will come roaring back. But I think right now we really do want to be looking at Cannibal Court. You just want to generate as many points as you can without risking your heroes. And the fact that this is also in both turns, I think is amazing. It really reminds me of Morgaunt, which is what I was playing at the end of third, and I think it's the best one by far. So all of the units and in the tiers that I'm going to be doing are going to be in relation to running Cannibal Court, because some of the stocks will go up and down for, I think, Lords of the Manor, and obviously Ghoul Patrol. Ghouls are better in Ghoul Patrol. But I mean, like, I think an Arch Regent is really good in Lords of the Manor. Because you might even run 2 because you just want to be proccing that extra ability. Whereas in Cannibal Court, I'm actually looking at some of the other heroes a little more closely than I think the Arch Regent. He just becomes a little more expensive. We're going to go into traits, and we're going to be pretty quick on traits. Cruel Taskmaster is great with Lords of the Manor, but like, how often are we spending those points in some of the other factions? Probably not too often. Savage Beyond Reason is like kind of cute, but again, we don't want to be fighting too much. Like, there's just not enough for us to fight and survive. I just don't think it's not strong enough. Basically, our heroes just aren't survivable enough. So I think we go with Stronger in Madness, which is add to the health characteristic, and give yourself a 5-up ward when you have 6 Noble Deed points, because we just want to push that survivability a little bit further. I think this works on Abhorrence, and I think this works on Courtiers. I like running it on Courtiers because they need to fight more. So your Abhorrence are going to have spell testing and prayers to passively generate stuff, whereas your Courtiers, you're going to want them to have more Noble Deed points because they need to spend them more often, whereas your Abhorrence just need to get to 6 and then spend it. You're hopefully having 2 to 3 to spend a turn with your Courtiers, so they need to fight a little bit more. Plus, the dream is that they fight, get up to that 6 Noble Deed points, proc Feeding Frenzy, gap a 5-up ward, and hopefully you're in a good position to just not die on the way back. Ooh, no. It's not that big of a deal. When it comes to the artifacts, one thing that I think is always worth mentioning when we're talking artifacts is that any of these artifacts that make you a priest or a wizard are only as good as the lore that you have. But I think we're a bit of an exception because we want to be praying, we want to be casting to get a Noble Deed point. So I think spreading the wealth is just always worth it. So it's hard for me to even look past this because it allows for, like I said, that passive generation of points. I think subtracting 2 from all control scores with Grim Garland is solid because it's all control scores. That's actually pretty okay. And then Heart of the Guardian is like kind of cute if you're doing a big build, but I just don't think it's worth looking at. It's just hard to get past this channel investments. Our lore is good enough. We want to be generating that passive. And so, like, there's just, I feel like there's no reason. You probably want to take that and put it on a courtier. So now that courtier is generating 2 to 3 points every battle round and putting you in a position to be returning models. That's including the Lords of the Man, or sorry, the Cannibal Court bonus of moving out of your territory, as well as the bonus for successfully getting a prayer off. So going into the spell lore, I think we have an awesome spell lore. We have an amazing unlimited spell, which is also a friendly targeted spell. So that makes it really good for what we're already trying to do, which is generate points. We should always have targets nearby. And on top of it, it's really good, and it's a 6 to cast. +2 to the move characteristic and +1 to wound rolls on infantry and cavalry, which is almost everything, is like really awesome. It's also not limited to non-hero, so you can put it on some of your quicker heroes or a hero that you want to send in to maybe a weakened unit or try and generate some points. It's a great spell, and you will have no limit of targets, which means that you should always be just trying to go for those noble deeds. Charnel Feast is fine. It's actually like kind of crazy when you read it, but when you think about the true application, there's a lot of wards out there. You're probably not doing a ton of damage, but it is kind of nuts. This is the spell that I was talking about, where you pick an enemy unit and then inflict D3 mortal damage, and you get to bring back a model for each allocated point of damage. You don't have to kill anything. So that's pretty cool into the Beef Boy meta, because you don't have to worry about actually bringing down one of these 3 or 4 wound models, which I struggle with all the time. And you can bring back your Beef Boys, you can bring back your Cryptors or your Flayers or your Morbeg Knights, and paired with Lords of the Manor, this is super appealing. I think that's what happens is people see this, they see Lords of the Manor, and they're like, I'm about to be bringing back my whole army. But it's not unlimited. And we don't get bonuses to cast. So anything else that's magically dominant is definitely going to be able to just focus down that spell. They're going to see that spell and they're like, nah, I'm not letting that go through. So I think it's good. I think that it's not great when it's what you're relying on. And Miasma of Madness looks terrible when you first look at it. It's crazy. You're going to pick an enemy unit, roll 7 dice. If 2 of them have the same face, which you'll always get that, you do 1 mortal wound. If 3 of them have the same face, they also get -1 to hit. And if 4 of them have the same face, they also get -1 to wound. What I like about it is that it's a 5. So it's always a spell that you can attempt to cast. I love that. The other thing is, like, if I actually ran the numbers, and it's not amazing, but it's one of our only debuffs. And the other thing, like, if you look at what it is statistically, read the spell as roll a dice, and on a 4+, do 1 mortal wound and subtract 1 to hit, and on a 6+, deal 1 mortal wound and subtract 1 from hit and wound, because the numbers are about the same. It's about 47% of the time that you're going to get the -1 to hit, and it's about 10% of the time that you're going to get -1 to wound. So it's a little bit worse than what I just said, but it's still not bad that on a coin flip you're doing -1 to hit, and that it's not, like, really, we just want the spell to go off. So something that might do a little incidental is pretty solid in here. And then you just might not always have a unit that's wholly within 12 for a particular wizard. So Miasma of Madness at a 5 is a good way to also just try and get those points. Our prayer lore is okay. Blessed Feast is fine as our unlimited spell. The unfortunate part being that it's an enemy unit thing, but we also don't have as many priests as we do wizards, so I don't think we need our unlimited spell to carry us as far. It's mostly there to help out heroes. It's really there to help out Usheran, if we're really talking about it. You heal 1 for each time a model in a unit is slain. Unfortunately, in the Beat Boy meta, that gets really tough. Like, you aren't really getting that effect as often. And for a 5, I think I'd rather be rolling elsewhere. And the bonus effect is good when you need it, but again, I think for a 5, I'd rather be going elsewhere. Summer King's Favor, I think, is a better target for Usheran, because if we can get that ultimate ability, so that one is going to give them an additional 1 noble deed point every time a model is slain. So again, kind of challenging, but sometimes, like, if you're going into some of this beefy boy stuff, a 4 wound model, that extra point just for killing a 4 wound model might be what you need to get to 6. But the Empowered version is really good on like someone like Usheran, because then he's now handing out more passive noble deed points to those around him. So then on a 10 plus for this one, um, every time a model is killed by a combat attack, uh, all friendly heroes within 18, so probably on Usheran, give out an additional noble deed point to those heroes. So that can actually be really, really strong if you get that empowered version. And then the one that you're going to probably be casting the most, and you probably are only going to have 1 or 2 priests, maybe 3. I have a few ideas for 3. Is going to be Eternal Conviction, which is just a hand out of 5+ ward. If you're not close to being empowered, then I would just be going for this one. A big challenge with Vec is going to be whether or not you're going to save up for empowered. And I think most of the time you don't. So you need to look at a lot of these and decide when you're trying to chant a prayer, the regular version, is it what you want? Is it good enough? And so I think Charnel Conviction is the one that you're just trying to answer, get your noble deed point, hand out a 5+ ward. If you're close to an empowered and you're in the right position, then you probably want to do Summer King's Favor and then just get everybody up to max noble deeds. So I think the prayer lore is fine. I just don't think that we have to worry too much about it. We have viable targets. The manifestation lore, I'll just briefly go over it and not belabor the endless spells, and we'll jump right into the units. I think ours is super mid. On one hand, we have Cadaverous Barricade, which is, in my opinion, actually better than, just slightly better than the Shackles. It's really good. And we can look at the War Scroll later, but it's also a 5, which is awesome. It has a long range, and it's gonna have move, and the opponent can't run, which is really strong for disrupting tactics. And it being a 5, it's really good as a countercast spell. Stampede is like okay. It being a 7 is not fun. Like I think we'd just rather cast something else most of the time, unless you want to do a zone blocking. And Chalice is just like fundamentally not written well enough. I think we're capping control scores, which I understand why we are. It's so you can't have a single model moving on to an objective and then having the Chalice add +12 to that control score, and then basically like if your opponent doesn't kill you to a man, you always take the objective. But I think capping it at 6 just makes it not very strong, and you have to pick a single unit. Doesn't apply to everything. So I think and it's a static manifestation. So all of those things are just like really hurting its ability to do much for you. And it cost a 6. I mean, like with how poorly it's written, it should probably be a 5. I want to tie back to one quick thing when talking about like unleash spell or countercast or magical intervention, any of those things, or any way that you want to phrase it. It's sometimes a challenge to decide what you want to do, because it's really, really valuable for us to use those off-turn spells to generate more noble deeds. So I have a hard time, trying to set up any one of these when I could just instead cast Miasma, or try and summon the Barricade, or cast our Unlimited spell, or even chant, honestly, because I can book those points. We want to convert everything, so I find working around endless spells and manifestations a little tough. I also think that Morbid Conjuration isn't just an immediate go-to choice because of that same problem. We have no bonuses to cast, and Morbid Conjuration has a few really hard casts. So if you're looking at a different lore, I think you want to look at something that's got a lot of low casts that you can easily get out and keep generating points. So Primal isn't terrible. I'm a big fan of Aetherrot Machineries, and I actually think Twilight Sorceries are pretty good because they will get you a +1 to cast. So that's just where we're going to go on those. So next, I am going to go ahead and jump into units, and I'm actually going to skip Nagash. He's good. He's warping. He changes everything. I think I could do an episode on like Nagash and every faction, and it's not really like, in my opinion, how the faction works per se. I couldn't do one on OBR. That would be Matt, because that's what he's been doing, and pretty well. But he eats up a lot of your points, and I think he just warps the way that the faction works. So I'm just gonna move past him. I think he's a lot better in Lords of the Manor because you can get those crazy spells off, and he has his own way to really help out. So we're going to go into Usheran first. All right, I'm going to bring up the tier list before we even go into this. I'm going to grab, where is Usheran? He's right here, and we're going to go ahead and put him in S. So here's our tier list, and this is all related to, again, the formation that we're picking. S is pretty much auto include, right? A is you need to come up with a reason not to bring it. B is kind of your good enough flavor to taste. C is maybe you like this unit and it's not really pulling its weight, but you can make a case for it. And then D is you should really just be leaving it at home. It's like, I mean, obviously, play what you want, have a good time. I'm not trying to suggest that, but I'm saying, like, anything in D, just it either needs a rewrite or it needs an adjustment, or it's going against what we're trying to do. And Ushering is S. I love him. I love his model. I love his lore. I love everything about him. I do wish that and I actually think we kind of might, but right now a lot of people feel like we're locked into him. But I'll quickly explain why, and then we can move on. He's relatively hardy. He's not super hardy. He's died in every game that I've played almost, except for one that I have ongoing with Matt that he probably will die. But he just has a super consistent damage characteristic. So 4 attacks at this D3 plus 3 damage that are already hitting on threes and already wounding on twos and have Ren 2. That's super solid. And then 8 monstrous talents. Like, so we're talking 12 attacks at damage 2 that are already hitting pretty well. He is incredibly solid when it comes to the damage. Don't forget, if Feeding Frenzy is up, he's going to add 1 to both of these. None of them are companion attacks either, so he can receive any amount of buffs to them from other abilities. Like, he is great on your damage, and then, like, the Beefoy meta, who cares? He's going to go in, he's going to deal the damage. He should be getting in there and getting up to 6 noble deeds. And I think that's why you bring him. You bring him as a backup um, a backup summon loyal subjects guy, but mostly you just want him up there getting those noble D points and then permanently putting that 24-inch bubble for Feeding Frenzy, because that's what his passive, the Carrion King, does. Is when he has 6 noble deed points, he gets a 24-inch bubble, so that covers almost the whole board. It's fantastic. And then him getting battle damage, he just loses 2 monstrous talents. Like, seriously, he's super fantastic. If just on like the slightly squishy side, but he has a few things that really like kind of add up that help. His rampage is crazy strong. You pick 3 enemy units in combat with him, roll a dice for each one, and if that roll exceeds the control characteristic, it gives them strike last. Like, that's actually really amazing. I've had some bad luck with it, but it's really good. Most of the beefy cavalry is still only control 1, maybe control 2. So you're looking at 3 pluses and 2 pluses to give everything strike last. And that's awesome when you're also in chain combats. And so he just kind of turns everything on. So he goes in there, he's presumably handing out strike last to a few targets. He's getting up to that max noble D points, and then you're able to move on to some of your other hittier stuff and go in there. So he's definitely worth it. His own spell is cool. I think you cast it if you don't really have anything else to cast. He is a 2-cast wizard, which is awesome. He's got a ward 5. I think that the reason is this big old 7 here. You usually want to be generating points. If you've got your 6, then who cares? Go ahead and cast it. Sometimes you'll be casting it into something that's got a really cool attack or horde sweeper attack or something like that, and you'll really get a lot out of it. But I think early on, you just want to make sure you might want to pad his noble deeds so that when he goes into combat, he's already sitting on like 1 or 2, and then you just guarantee that he gets to a 6. And then he's got his Epicenter of Delusion, which it's pretty fantastic as well. It's your hero phase, so if you're going second and you get shot off the board, which I have happened, then you don't get to pick this, which is a bummer. But some of them are whatever, but most of them are pretty solid. Adding 1 to wound rolls against monsters is whatever. Skip unless you're playing monsters, and then you pull it out. Adding 1 to run and charge rolls is fantastic for board control. It's fantastic for guaranteeing charges. It's fantastic for the fact that you're a charging army. It's what you want to do. And with Lords of the Manor, Cannibal Court, we're trying to be in the opponent's deployment zone. So those early runs and those early charges are even more important. Defenders of the Realm is +1 to save while you're contesting objectives that you control. Also really solid. We're playing aggressive. We want to move fast. We've got low saves. So this is one of like 7 ways in the entire game to save stack across 23 factions. So I actually think like taking advantage of this isn't a bad idea, especially with more bag knights who are already on a 4+ save. And then grand tournament is like kind of whatever. There's just a lot of conditions. It needs to be a flesh eater course hero who is also charging, and then you add one to attacks. It can be really good if you're sending like Usherin into a debuffed situation, and you can buff your way back out of it, back into that 3+2+ range. But a lot of times it's these middle two that you're going to be doing. He's fantastic. All right, so we got our Abhorrent Ghoul King on Royal Terrorgeist. This guy is not. I, I'm gonna put him in C. Like you got to come up with a reason if you're doing the build. Oops, sorry, wrong thing. And then yeah, we can talk on points too. Usheran sits at 470. It's a lot. Um, and I'm gonna actually backpedal real quick. Flesh Eater Courts have one of the best regiment setups. So every one of the courtiers, which are those minor heroes that can bring back models with their must regard ability, can be brought in a regiment with an abhorrent, which are the bigger heroes, the vampires, um, as a flesh eater noble. So they're all bonus heroes, which is amazing. And like, I don't know why most of the other factions don't do this. But as you'll see later, that doesn't just solve the problem of these foot heroes, because there's still a few of them you probably just like don't really look at unless you're doing something specific. But just know that every single one of those courtiers is a bonus hero, and that's awesome on its own. And every single opponent can take these bonus heroes. And Usheran, he can take anything, and like I say, he's 470. It's probably worth it. It's probably fine. It's yeah, I think it's adequate and totally okay. But then when we're looking at the abhorrent Ghoul King on Terrorgeist and the Zombie Dragon, the next two that I'm putting in lower ranks, just remember these guys are you're not getting a whole unit for switching them out is the thing, and I just don't think they're good enough. So one other thing I didn't talk on about the noble deeds points is that you you don't gain them for companion attacks. So these guys that are riding these mounted beasts aren't getting noble deeds for half their attacks. And that's actually a challenge. So now we're only getting noble deeds off these 5 attacks that do 2 damage. Odds are you're getting about 4 points off of a 4+ save, and I just don't think that's good enough for 380 points. Yeah, they're wizard 1, and so that means if you get your spell off in the turn, you're only getting to 5, and you're not getting to 6. I just genuinely don't think that's good enough, and they don't come with enough of the other abilities that I think are solid. We get the single attack, shooting attack, so it's nothing, like ignore it. And then you've got the Yahtzee game down here where you're just going to roll your Fanged Maw, your 3 Fanged Maw attacks, and then try and do 6 mortal wounds. It's awesome. It's fun. I've done it a few times. I've been on the receiving end of it a few times. It's cool. You can run a build where you stack the amount of attacks that you get, and you're really trying to go for this. I just don't think. I think because I'm saying like you can run a build, you can try it. That's why it's in the C. It's in the pet units that you really need to decide you're going to take. But it has a high damage ceiling, and it's pretty fun. And this ferocious hunger is it's whatever. I mean, if you get it off, it is really cool, because then now you're doing those on mortals on a 5. It's just not reliable enough to, I think, really be the centerpiece that your army needs. The Ghoul King on the Zombie Dragon is whatever. He's kind of worse. So I'm loath to put him straight in D. Where is he? He's right here. I'm loath to put him straight in D, but he's definitely in the bottom C. He's probably the worst C. Because if you are running that monster mesh, he does give everybody run and charge, which is not insignificant. Sorry, not everybody. Not Usheran, which is a big deal. Which is, I mean, might move him into D, but maybe not. I said this tier list is actually about Cannibal Court, and in Cannibal Court, he's definitely a D. So he's just also not doing enough. You have the same thing here. You don't have the cool mortal spike. You don't have any consistency with these 4s. He's got a weird spiky shooting weapon. This is okay, but it's a worse version of Usheran's, like turning off commands. If you exceed the control characteristic and you're just picking one, it should just be like everything he's in combat with or something. And he doesn't have the deep strike that the other zombie dragon does. So there's just a lot of things that I think he's missing out on. If you had the deep strike, you were able to just come in enemy territory and then start that passive generation, I would at least put him in C for Cannibal Court. But he has no place in Cannibal Court, and I think he barely has a place in this army, unfortunately. Grand Justice Gourmain. Oh man, the verdict is really out on this guy. So he has this one ability that once per turn in your hero phase, you pick one of five, or sorry, four amazing abilities, and you roll a 3+. And if you get it, you get these awesome abilities. And if you don't get it, he literally does nothing. He has a terrible combat profile. He is not a wizard. He is not a priest. He's unique, so he can't become a priest, and he's an abhorrent. So his little generation, he needs to be at 6 points before he does anything. He moves slow. He doesn't fly. He doesn't have a save. He's just doing this possibly game breaking awesome thing, and on a 3+. What are these awesome game breaking things? One is, so you're always picking an enemy unit. He's like judging an enemy unit, right? You're always picking an enemy unit. And then on the 3+, you're either adding one to wound rolls. Great. That's fantastic. Especially if you're going into a debuff army and you've got deranged transformation for +1 to wound, and then you add this for the +1 to wound, you're getting out of those debuffs that they usually desperately need to slow you down. This one gives your non-monsters run and charge, which is really cool. They just have to charge the target, basically. Really, run and charge is obviously really good. Like everybody's been talking about Night Hunt. It's really solid. And these last until the start of your next turn, so that does mean like it turns on counter charge for that unit, so they have a particular hammery unit that they want to get into certain positions. You can jam them up. This one is if the target is in combat with an abhorrent, you get to add one to hit rolls for friendly units. That one's pretty solid too because it does affect that abhorrent. So if Usheran's in combat and you grievous insult to the court, Usheran's getting a +1. Anybody else who dogpiles into that combat is also getting a +1. Pretty okay. The problem is most of your opponents don't want to be in combat. Most of your opponents aren't going to be in combat and alive by the time you get to using this ability. And then this one is also pretty solid. If a friendly opponent has been destroyed by a unit, you add one to the damage characteristic of melee weapons for units that target it. That's a really strong ability, and your opponents are going to die to a lot of things. The problem is you probably don't want to lose them. So I do think this guy's really interesting. I think he's hard to justify because he doesn't do anything else, and you do need to be close to a 2-drop. And he just doesn't do anything else. And until we're into a screen meta where his 4 attacks on 4s and 3s with no rend can matter, I just think it's hard to play him. That being said, these abilities are so good that people are going to run them in lists and they're going to do well, and then everyone's going to tell me I'm an idiot. But for me, I'm going to not roll this 3 up on the turns that I need it, and I'm going to roll it on the turns that I don't, and that's just how that's going to work. So the abhorrent Gore Warden, he's one of the new models. He's a beautiful model. I really like this guy with his 12 move, and he's got 7 health. So he's a little hardier than some of the other abhorrents. He's a wizard 1, and he has this always use ability where he can teleport, and he can teleport with up to 2 units, including crit players and a unit of Morbeg Knights. And as long as nobody's in combat, you pick them all up, you put them all back down. I think that's awesome. That's awesome for Cannibal Court. We're trying to get wholly out of our territory. Pretty easy to do with this guy. You don't even have to teleport with that 12-inch move. He's got the little standard profile, but also being a wizard 1 is nice. I rate this guy, especially in the court, for what we're trying to do. I think I will put him. He might be. We'll start with the high B. He's pretty solid. You need abhorrence. I don't think he's top of the list for abhorrence, but I think being able to do this is good for tactic play, good for setting up. Being able to bring the 3 units. Yeah, I'm going to look indecisive. I'm actually going to move him into A because I think he's pretty good for tactic play too. Because a lot of teleports, you just bring one guy that might have a control score 5 or up to 10 or something like that. With him, he could possibly bring with him like control score like up to 20. So you can do like take their land pretty easily with him, and you can really set up other tactics. And that's another reason why Night Hunt are really strong. So I think that actually does put him a little bit in A, especially in a Cannibal Courts, because he can really get in there and start passively generating those points like you need him to do. And he can kind of pick his matchups, right? So he can pick on small heroes. He can tag some of those objective chasers. A lot of times you don't want to move stuff out of position. He can get out of position to attack Fellbats on the edge of the board, to attack Doomfire Warlocks on the edge of the board, and then you just pick him up next turn and put him back to where he needs to go. So I like him, and I think he's good for this. Okay, so this is the first of my controversial picks. I'm gonna place him and then we'll talk. He is in just about every list, and I'm gonna put him in B. I think most of the time you can leave him at home. I actually don't like him to be frank. He's super killable, right? And even though he can't be seen while he's not in combat, how are you generating points if he's not in combat? So you make him a priest. Your chants are on a 5, so you're probably getting one prayer off every other turn. So he's getting 5 points over the whole game. Yeah, in Cannibal Court, he's probably generating a few more because he's able to get out and into the territory. So maybe 15 over the course of the whole game. He's not fighting. If he goes into fight, he is going to get killed with 5 attacks hitting on a 4, and then five wounds on a 5+ save. He will get killed, and you have this ability, which makes it seem like he's not going to get killed. Um, but again, it's that 3+. So like, how often do we want to have like our whole plan? And this is probably one of your 2 or 3 courtiers that can bring back models. You want your whole survivability, your whole plan hinging on this 3+. 3+, you give out strikes last, or you lock the enemy down. Awesome. Fail it, and he dies basically. So I don't really like him. I think he's fine, but he's making it into every lesson. A lot of people are saying he's not included. I just really don't think he is, because I think it's just hard for him to do what you want to do. Morbeg Knights. I wish this was in a better order so I could just go through all the heroes. Maybe I will just skip them. We're gonna get through all the heroes. I'm sorry. Okay, so Vargal Courtier. I like this guy. I might be a bit biased. I think I will put him in a low A. He'll probably be the bottom of the A's. Um, I think he's a great body for your not Stronger Madness. What is it called? Yeah, it is Stronger Madness. I think he's a great body for Stronger Madness. It's going to put him on 10 wounds. He then has a ton of attacks. Possibly he's going to get his 6 noble deed points, and then at the end of that combat, hopefully he'll heal D6 and have a 5 aboard. I think he's just a little more survivable. And as I was talking to one of my buddies, Andy, he might be in here in the chat. He said that he messes with your opponent's like target priorities. Just knowing a unit can heal, you are either less likely to just put incidental attacks into him, or more likely to overput attacks and maybe not put him into the actual threat unit. So the fact that he heals no matter what. So if any models are slain by him, he heals D6 and then can retreat. If he kills the whole unit, he can't retreat, but he can always heal. He can always do that. He also moves fast, so we can get into that territory pretty easily. So I really do like him. I usually try and make him a priest, have him going around handing out that 5+ ward, or doing the offensive spell, and then trying to pick on some units, jump into combats where there's something else already there, and have him kind of be the guy who's bringing back models for me. And at 10 health, it does mean like we need 5 odor hits, we need 5 trog hits to actually kill him. And really, we're talking 6 when we're talking about his 6 up or 5 up ward. So I really don't mind him. Okay, here's the Cardinal. And I'm going to go ahead and pop him right where he goes. And I actually think he is better than Usheran. So this guy's crazy. This guy's crazy because first, let's go look at his points. No, let's not. Let's talk about him. So he's got the 6 of save, Garb. He's got 5 health, Garb. He moves slow. He's got trash attacks. He's got gourmet style attacks. He is a priest. He's not a hero, so we can add stuff to him. We don't really want to add stuff to him. And then he's got this ability, that cool thing, any hero phase. So I think that is huge. We're doing this any hero phase, and we're picking a friendly hero wholly within 12, and on a D3, 2+, we're giving him noble deeds equal to that amount. So we're getting out 2 or 3 noble deeds points. That's huge. We've already talked about how sparse handing out noble deeds is. And this is also both turns. So I mean, like we got 10 turns a game. Let's be conservative and say we only get 6 of these rolls, and let's be conservative and say we only get a 2 each time. That's 12 noble deed points that he's handing out. That's really significant. That's 2 maxes. That's a lot of units being healed, and it's not once per army. So you can have 2 of these guys. So with all of this, he's got a terrible profile, but he's got this really amazing passive generation of points. What would you expect this guy to cost? Maybe like 160 or something like that. Well, it turns out he's 110, so he has a fantastic amount of points. I actually think that there's a good argument for running 2 or 3 of these guys just because they're so cheap as chips that you can just be chucking noble D points onto you, and really just doing everything that the Feck army was used to doing, and do it all without risking your heroes. Um, I think that this guy opens the conversation back up for Lords of the Manor because you can just be chucking all of those points out. Um, I think then, if you're running 3, probably consider putting the priestly vestments on him, on one of them, just to give him a +1 to chant, because our prayers just aren't amazing enough to have that many priests. But seriously, like, this guy is crazy good because of this. Like, he doesn't need anything else, and because of that point stack, that 110 points is just insane. Just protect him and hand out points, and just outvalue your opponents. I think that there's an argument for not having Usheran if you have at least 2 of these. Royal Decapitator. I love this model. This guy is so cool. This is like one of the coolest models that they've come out with recently. This guy is trash, and it's really sad. Uh, 3 attacks with 4. I mean, all these profiles are going to be the same. I'm not going to touch on them very much. 3 attacks, 4s to hit. So we're missing half of those. 3s to wound. So we're probably dropping another one. So we got 1 at rent 2, 3 damage. He can do chain fight with serfs. Like, that's whatever. It's not that good. And then if he deals damage to an infantry hero, why is it? I mean, it doesn't need to be infantry. It should just be anything. But if he deals damage to an infantry hero and then doesn't die, because we got 5 up save with 5 health, then you roll a 5+ and you automatically kill it. Like, that's gonna be awesome when it happens. But like, most of the time, you're just missing with these attacks and getting super frustrated, right? And he has no other ways to really generate anything. Like, this guy just isn't there. And I think, if I remember correctly, he like costs the same as, yeah, he's the same as the abhorrent cardinal for some reason. It's a bummer. Hopefully he gets fixed up, or hopefully he goes down to like 70 or 80 points or something. He's just not there. The Archregent. This guy is cool. He's changed a decent amount. Both of his abilities have changed a bit. I think it's enough. They've changed enough to where I think we'll put him here because we're running into the problem. You can see where a lot of our top heroes are all are abhorrents, right? So he's competing for that slot that's like not as good. And being a double cast is nice because he's going to generate more of that, generate more noble deeds. The problem is he's just not fast enough. He doesn't get bonuses to cast. His War Scroll spell is fairly okay, especially for bringing stuff back. So the first unit that's set up gets to move D6. That's pretty good for when you're summoning units back. It lets you try and snake objectives a little bit and kind of get into a better position, or even set up better counter charges for the next turn, stuff like that. And then this Countless Service is kind of neat. The problem is now it's on a 3+ and it's wholly within 12 inches. And you roll a dice and you can bring up to 3 serfs, which is good, or 1 knights. So this is what more people are again connecting with that Lords of the Manor. Like, so you bring back 2 knights, so you bring back 4 serfs. It's pretty cool, but on a 3+ and wholly within 12, he has to be right there, right in the action, right behind these guys. Usually they'll charge out of his range, and then suddenly on your hero face, he's like no longer in there. And so that's you find that this wholly within 12 actually becomes quite a hindrance for a guy who's so squishy, and you really want to be using your wizard too, and you just don't want him in the threat range, and he just can't keep up with that 6-inch move either. So that's why I rate the Gore Warden a little better. This is just a little too restrictive, I think, to really be using as often as you would hope. If it was any hero phase, I think it'd be a little easier to keep him up, and you still wouldn't be using it that much. So I don't think it would be busted. But only on your hero phase, there's just a lot of times that the unit that you want just isn't going to be in range. Let's see. We got this guy. I don't even really want to talk about him. He's like a weird little hero hunter. It's okay, but he just I don't even have a thing for him. He's done a D. Just because, like, a 6-inch move hero hunter that can't run and charge and doesn't do anything else. He's a wizard 1. Like, I just don't think he's getting you anywhere. All right, so a few more in courtiers. So this guy, he is like a pet of mine, but I think he is a high C. Yeah, he's a high C. No, he's a low B. he gives you a shooting attack, which is pretty okay. Um, and it's D3 damage, which is nice, and it's shooting combat. So I think this we need to remember when we're looking at him and his unit. And we might just do his unit with him because there's no reason to take him without the unit. So he moves quick, which is good. This is good for our Cannibal Court. This is good for getting in the territory. 6 health is low, 5 up save is low. We don't really want to be fighting unless we have to. But the 2 damage is good. We're talking noble leads. We can get to those. This guy just generally doesn't generate a lot of noble leads. Instead, he's trying to turn on this piercing screech, which is where if he kills a model, hard to do in the Beef Boy meta right now. If he kills a model, you get to add 1 to the damage characteristic of the ranged weapons of the Crypt Flayers. So that sounds really good, and it turns out it is. Problem is, this profile isn't amazing. You probably want to spend all out attack to make sure you're doing it on turns that matter, and then you have to pick on a weakened unit. So that I think he's just a little risky. I'm really like trying to make him work right now, so this might change later. So I'm just going to go to their unit, and I think you just naturally have to put their unit with them because it's kind of what it is. I will put them above him because you get quite a bit of attacks. They're expensive. All 3 of these guys are both these guys are 170, so he's 170, and then the unit is also down here is also wow. We have a lot of 170 units. The unit is also 170 right here. So it is expensive, but I do like that you can make this unit your honor guard, giving it that +1 to hit and wound against, General's Reg. So wounding on 2s is amazing in shooting attacks. A lot of the debuffs don't affect shooting attacks, so a lot of times this 3s and 2s will stick, right? And then if you get that mind-shattering cacophony off, we're looking at 2 damage at 2 rend with, lots of attacks. If you have a 6-man unit that's 25 attacks, like the damage potential is pretty big. But to really make sure you're maximizing these guys, you also do want them to charge in. Because they still have a lot of attacks in close combat as well. So you can't not send them in. But they do have this other ability that I think is pretty strong in Cannibal Court because you're able to pick up any hero that doesn't have fly and place that hero within their combat range and outside of 3. That does give you an effective, pretty long teleport. They have a 12-inch move, and they can be behind the unit, and then you can move your 12 and put them in front of the unit. It gives you a really long teleport with some of your opponents. So you can try and get them into, or courtiers, you can get them into positions that they maybe wouldn't normally be able to get in, such as like the Vargulf back behind some squishy spellcasting unit or support unit, and really try and get more points off for them. So I don't mind them. They're just really expensive, and you cannot forget that they need to go fight. And they do have relatively short range. The Gore Warden can also pick them up and drop them in threat range, maybe forcing your opponent to switch to a redeploy as well. Yeah, so I kind of like them, but they're not. It's not an auto include. Next, I'm going to look at the Crypt Hunter Courtier. I also like this guy. Again, we suffer from the 4+ to hit, but 3 damage is pretty nice. And he moves a little faster and he heals a little bit. I just think the Vargulf is better, but he does chain attack for his horrors and give them +1 to hit. And I think that's pretty good. None of the courtiers are wizards or priests, so they have to fight to generate these points. They have to use fight actions. And he is cheaper. He's 140. So he's a lot easier to get in your list. I think the big issue I have with him is just he's also swingy. So we're gonna put him in B, and I think he is probably right around there. And his unit is relatively hardy. It's okay. It's just that like it can be hard to keep these big units in coherency with each other. So not coherency, but you need to be in combat range to chain fight, right? So it can just be hard to have everything where you want it to be. They also heal, which I think is pretty awesome. The rend should always be going off because you should probably be chain fighting to make sure they're getting that +1 to hit and hitting on 3s. And crit auto wound is whatever on a 3+. I would almost wish it was like crit 2 hits or something like that. And 2 damage is nice. They just don't have any innate rend, and you don't have a lot of ways to get extra, but they're beefy. It's just that in the Beef Boy meta, they are not the beefiest, but I don't mind them, and I think that they are probably better than Flayers. I think they're better than the Mirror Scroll Herald too, to be honest. So we'll put them in front of. Okay, I think I have. Is that all the heroes? I think it is. Let me double check this list. If that's all the heroes, we've got a few more units. We should wrap up pretty quick on the. I think what we got more bag knights up here. Cool, not loading. This is going well. Time for me to pop this back in. Yeah, so we got more bag knights. More bag knights are great. Well, I'll just start by saying that. They are cavalry, so that means that they do not get that. You can't return models off of them from the Charnel Feast spell. So it is important to note that our best unit, which is the Morbeg Knights, does not benefit from probably like our low-key best spell in Lords of the Manor. So I think that's another reason why Lords of the Manor loses some effectiveness. But I'm going to go ahead and pop these guys in A, and they're definitely above the Bargulf. Actually, they're probably above him too, to be honest. Like he's good. It's just this unit is really solid. The unit can retreat and charge, which is great. Not getting locked up, not taking damage. They do impact hits, and they're a cav with 4 health. They're almost beef boys themselves. They got a 4-up save. The problem is there's only 3 of them, but charge one damage is pretty nice. So you should have 2 damage on their 5 attacks each. I hate this, by the way. I just hate this from a design perspective. Like having one attack that's 3s and 4s and having another attack that's 4s and 3s is just a nightmare to speed roll. But whatever. They can be affected by our unlimited spell, deranged transformation, which will give them a +1 to wound. And then if you all out attack them, I mean, these will be on 3s as well. So they can be pretty good. And then don't forget that Feeding Frenzy affects both of these attacks. So you move them up to 7 attacks each. They can generate a lot of 2 damage attacks. This one rend isn't amazing, but we work with what we work with. And they move super fast. So I think they're really good. They're also 170. They're great in a general's regiment. They're great for getting objectives, fighting off things that are trying to do objective play, and they're great for just being your fighting force. They're really solid, but they're not entirely conducive to the Lords of the Manor because one of your best abilities just doesn't really work on them, and they're probably not going to be in range of your abhorrent Archregent. So now we're looking at a rally. In order to bring back a model, you need four pluses, which is pretty unlikely, but maybe you get it with some of those bonuses. You're probably not in range for the artifact because that's also another holy within 12. So we're rolling 7 dice as long as we have the musician here. We're rolling 7 dice and you're hoping for 4 pluses to bring back 2 models. Like that would be great, but is that really happening all that often? Probably not. But I do think since we're playing an aggressive army in Cannibal Court, we're trying to be outside of our territory. These guys will be right up with their heroes, right up with everything. So I think that they are the way to go. And at 170, it's pretty okay. I'm not big on spamming. I don't think you spam them, but I think 1 unit of 6 is great. 2 units of 6 is fine. 1 unit of 6 and 1 unit of 3 is good too. Crypt Guard, I'm in a weird spot with. Crypt Guard and Crypt Ghouls fill similar roles. They have similar amounts of attacks. They have similar amounts of damage, but they do not have similar amounts of staying power. Even when you have these guys on the 5-up, they get smoked by. I'm gonna put them in B and above this guy. Even when you put them next to a hero, they're gonna have a 5+ ward. They're still just getting smoked by everything. So they basically just have this 5-up ward because almost everything in the game has rend 1 and they have a 6+ save. Army of Madness is kind of cute because you turn off commands until the start of your next turn. But like your best case scenario is that they fight, turn off commands, they die on the strike back, and then your opponent can't use commands throughout their entire turn or throughout your entire turn or something like that. Because if you're in combat, they're probably not doing any commands anyway. And frankly, if I'm in combat with Crypt Guard, I'm probably not all out attacking because I don't care. I'm probably not all out defensing because, like, frankly, I don't really care. Like maybe I am, depending on how many. If it's a reinforced unit and I've only killed like 6 or so there's a lot of attacks coming through. But they do generate a lot of attacks is the other thing. So they're just kind of a weird unit. They crumble. They're kind of weird. But I think it just in the end, when you're looking at having a unit that fits this role, I think ghouls just do it slightly better, but they're not bad. And again, you're looking at the 6-inch move. You need to be a little bit more aggressive than that. So I think they might struggle just a bit to keep up with our Cannibal Court that's trying to move a little faster. I think they're great turn 1 screens and they're really cheap. I don't know if the whole 20 crypt guard is an auto include like some people have suggested online. It just feels like it dies really quickly to much of anything, and then has it really done anything? We have a few more units, and then I'm gonna wrap up. Crypt guard. Actually, look, while we're in here, you're not playing these. Okay, we're not doing it. Maybe in a royal menagerie, maybe not. And here we'll do this because the Terrorgeist does still have his cool like spike ability. It's fun. Like it is a lot of fun. I love playing monster matches. But if we're doing Cannibal Court, you are not taking these units. And I think even Royal Menagerie just isn't that good. I'd almost rather just play a Laukobai army, and maybe that's because I think Laukobai looks cool. And while we're up here, we will add these guys, Crypt Ghouls. Probably better than Vargolf. Yeah, better than Vargolf. No, not better than Vargolf. So we'll put Crypt Ghouls right there, see if we can find them. Yep, here they are. Crypt Ghouls have a similar profile, but the thing is, you're getting 20. You're getting 20 for like 40 extra points. That's really, really good. They're a really good swarm unit or horde unit. They're a really good screen. They do get a little bit of rend, which is kind of cute, especially when you got things there. So then it means that you're generating a lot of attacks. They also crit auto wound, which is pretty sweet. Bellacore, by the way, just smokes these guys, makes them into nothing by turning off that auto wound. But I like it. And the rend is fine when you have as many attacks as you do. I know Crypt Guard have the same thing. I am adverse to running 40 because I think you run into the upper limit of how many models you can even get into combat. But I think having multiple 20s as screens is really solid. And if your opponent can't put them all down, and the battle shock being gone, it can be really easy to just generate these back and just create a massive headache for your opponent and to really control the board. So I think they are kind of like a staple of like tagging good units and trying to just slow them down. And then the last one is the Royal Beast Flayers. I don't have a ton of experience with these guys. I think that they were better last edition than they are now, is what it comes down to. But I don't think they're bad. I think they will get better when other things show up. We're gonna put them at top of C. They're serfs, so you can bring them back. You can't reinforce them, so they probably just get smoked in one go. This guy's no longer worth any extra wounds, so it really is just 8 wounds that just get picked up. Subtracting 1 from the damage characteristics while they're in combat with these things is really cool because you can protect other stuff by just having them near. And they are pretty cheap, and they do have a decent amount of attacks, but it is less than the Crypt Flayers. And yeah, as Matt's saying in the chat, and I do agree, turning off rampages can be really solid. Sorry, that's over here. Turning off rampages can be really solid. And there are some rampages that are really scary. Like, turning off Nagashes can be really good. Yeah, I agree, Matt. Or M. Shan. I agree that Gargants don't want to see this. Beast Claw don't really want to see it either. I think they do really help in certain metas, but I don't know if it isn't just better to have 20 guys in the way than to really have these. I don't know. This will need a little bit more. That's why I put them in. A top of C is probably too mean. They're probably totally playable, and they're probably above both of the Juicy Boy heroes. So, yeah, I apologize. That was probably a little too harsh. They're heavily meta dependent, and I think they bounce off of a lot of things. But when you come up against any of those monster matchups, which you're likely to see one, I think they're really solid. And Royal Beast Flayers are 120 for 10. So it's 10. I thought there was only 8. They're competing with that Crypt Guard slot. So I think that they're probably interchangeable with the Crypt Guard. And they're pretty close. The Crypt Guard do hand out that 5-up ward, which is pretty nice to turn off commands. They're probably interchangeable, honestly, between the two at 120. So yeah, that's it. We got the manifestations. I'll just briefly, like I already kind of talked about them. This one is whatever. Really, if you're doing anything, it's to stop teleports and it's to move block and it's to get in their way. It's fine. I like the move characteristic on it, actually. It's pretty good. That's whatever. Cadaverous Barricade is awesome. Turning off run and retreat. 10 wounds out of 4 of save is actually surprisingly annoying too. Having move characteristic. There's a lot of times that you just spit this out, tag a unit, and then the unit just like can't complete the battle tactic that they declared. And it's only a 5 to cast. I really like it. Chalice is Unfortunately, due to you pick a single unit within 18 to add points for every model that was within 12 and slain, so up to a maximum of 6. I mean, like it when it works, it's going to be great, but like 6 health on a 6-up save on a static manifestation, you're probably just giving your opponent a really good charge target. I just don't think this was written well enough. And then the Charnel Throne. The Charnel Throne is absolutely a must. I know a lot of people leave some things at home. I don't think you can leave the Charnel Throne at home because it's going to give you that passive generation of points. And I know I keep talking about passive noble degeneration. Charnel Throne is it. And you can set up the Charnel Throne in a way that you enter the Charnel Throne with the reigning champion ability. So you're 3 inches away from the Charnel Throne. The Charnel Throne can actually be outside of where you're legally allowed to deploy because it just has to be deployed within your territory. And then you use Ruler of All Thy Survey, get your D3 Noble Deeds points. And then after that, set up your steward in your movement phase, wholly within 6 of it, not in combat. You can actually place them outside of your wholly outside of your territory a lot of the times. So you can do this to like daisy chain them out, which is pretty nice, and then just start that passive point generation right away. I think it's good. I think you sit in it 1, maybe 2 turns maximum. You're just not getting to it very often. But if you can and getting those points, it could be really, really good. And it can be like a late game, like maybe you're only 2 points off. Move in, hop into the throne, roll for your noble deeds, get out of the throne, summon your unit. It can really swing things. I think it's pretty solid, and it's really like it's kind of hard to kill compared to some other things that are really similar, like 10 health on a 4-up save is really funny when you compare it to some of the other terrain features. So I like it. I think you always bring it. And then that's it. So overall, just I think about to wrap up here real quickly. I don't have a lot more to say. Just that we're trying to generate points passively. We're not trying to stick our juicy heroes into combat with beefy boys. And I think Usheran is beefy enough that he can go into those combats. And the Archregent can just give you points constantly. I think the Archregent fits in almost all lists because of that. And I think you are not Archregent. I'm sorry, Cardinal. I think you can make the case for running more than one. I think you can make the case for not running these guys, Gore Wardens or Archregents, and just running these guys because they're just handing it out. And if I remember correctly, I think they can even pick themselves. And if you have 2 of them, then they can definitely just pick each other. But really, you're wanting to pick courtiers. Sorry, these documents load so slow, even when you download them. It's a mistake. um, I'll get back to that and maybe add that in the notes. But they're just super solid. And then when you're looking at units, Crypt Ghouls are great for lining up, and everybody knows Morbag Knights are good. They combine being hardy, having a decent save, moving quick, and a decent amount of attacks. It's everything you kind of need in Vec. I think in fact we need to get away from this, sending in our heroes to fight and relying on casts, because even our casting heroes are only generating about 5 points. Only generating about 5 points a game, or 7 if you get lucky with some unleash spells or magical interventions. And when you're looking at coming in and actually doing damage, you need to be able to protect yourself, which is why I actually like Vargulfs. The thing I don't like about Vargulfs, and I didn't stop to point out, is they are 180 points, which is just too much for not having like any off combat abilities. But I think it's what we got to deal with when it comes to courtiers. You can run these smaller courtiers and you can just chuck points onto them with a cardinal. That is actually totally viable, especially with a herald, a Marl Scroll herald. You could probably be running them and then just having him, shake his wand onto the herald and just never put the herald in combat. When you get to that, it might be worth considering the Decapitator. I don't think so. I think this guy still brings a little bit more to the table that makes that better. So I just think we really need to start looking at this guy more, and we probably need to bring 2. We definitely need to be bringing 1, and we need to be trying to generate points outside of combat. So with that, I think everybody showed up. If you have any comments, if you think I am a complete fool, or if there's something I missed, or something else you want me to cover soon, bring it up. Also for Matt, he plays a lot of armies. Go ahead and drop a comment if you're watching this just on not live. You're watching it on YouTube. Also, we'll answer questions quickly. Maybe I got something wrong. Maybe you think a unit should be higher or lower. Maybe you've had a lot of success against something, or maybe your meta is a little different. Just yeah, let us know. Let's start a conversation. Other factions that I play or that I own are Daughters of Cain. I've kind of there's I think Dan is in this chat. He joked that I play the blood factions. So I play Daughters of Cain. I play Corn. I play Seraphon, which Sotek is the Seraphon god of blood. Um, I play Soulblight Gravelords as well as why am I blanking on the last one? I mean Night Hunt. Um, yeah. So if there's a faction that you want to see next, let me know and I can start compiling notes. Um, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Matt said, let us know if you want to see another live stream. I know Matt's got a whole list of factions that he's working on. But if there's anything you specifically want to see me try and break down, let me know. I'll try and gather a few games. And then I want to revisit this later too. So this is with only a few games in the pocket and just a lot of online discussion and a lot of basically a lot of really close losses with a faction that I took no losses with in third and me just wondering like what's going wrong. And I think it was just because I was trying to do the same thing that we were doing in third and it just doesn't, the meta does not work for it right now. So that was when I just started like really looking at it and being like, there has to be something, something else is going on here. And everyone else is running into that problem. And I think they were because they were good and strong in third. And then, you carry over these same strategies and they're just not functioning the same way. And so I think that's a big reason why the win rate has been impacted. I think we FEC players are not looking at this faction the right way anymore, or at least where the game is at. And I think with this shift, I think we could start seeing a lot more success and come back to being, boogeyman again. So yeah, again, what you want to see, let me know. I'll, and like I said, I'm also going to revisit this later. This all might change. I might do one that's focused more on Lords of the Manor if suddenly that becomes viable again, but probably not. So with that, I appreciate it. And yeah, drop a comment. Thanks.